Is Russia really pulling out of Ukraine? We have been watching the tensions between the two countries rise for months now, and people, including many world leaders, have been speaking about how best to respond to the situation, but it's been precarious to say the least. Everyone is worried, thousands of troops have been stationed at the borders of Ukraine, and while everyone says an invasion is imminent, the only people who seem to be denying it and swearing it's not is Russia. Just hours ago, news broke and our eyes turned over to Eastern Europe again as Russia began to withdraw some of its troops from the border. It's not exactly clear how many units are going to be withdrawn or how far the withdrawal will stretch, as there are currently units to the north, east, and south of Ukraine. If this ends up being confirmed, this will be the first step taken by Russia to de-escalate the crisis, which has brought Europe and the world closer to conflict than we've seen in decades. US President Joe Biden was even just warning that a full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine would leave at least 100,000 civilians dead, and that it would truly ripple out and alter our world. I mean, threats were so imminent that the Ukrainian embassy was moved out of Kiev. Both the US and NATO in general have been putting pressure on the Russian president in order to get him to ease the tension, even threatening a quote swift and severe response to any invasion of Ukraine, and these repercussions would come in the form of sanctions. There was fear that these threats would only go on to further agitate the Russian leader, but with this news, perhaps things are exactly the opposite. Right now, both Ukraine and really the rest of the world are responding cautiously to the news. Military experts are warning that it's too soon to be sure of or really understand the extent of the de-escalation that is happening. Apparently, while the news of this was being broken, the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, had some thoughts and feelings about our involvement or our concerns over the potential invasion that he wanted to express. It is said that he has been mocking the Western world for most of the time the tensions have been rising, and that this move, in part, was to portray or prove that the talks of a potential war that were going on in the Western world were not only false, but seemingly hysterical. I mean, the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova herself said, quote, "February 15th, 2022 will go down in history as the day Western war propaganda failed, humiliated and destroyed without a single shot fired." And a spokesman for the Russian government asked reporters if the, quote, exact time of the start of war had been published. There have to be other motives for the removal of troops, though, right? I mean, this couldn't have merely just been a ploy to mess with the West. That would be far too expensive and, for lack of a better term, a bit childish perhaps. It is possible that this move, although it's being made out to seem like a humiliation tactic, might have actually been a move to show diplomacy. NATO's chief has been welcoming signals for the last few days that would show that perhaps Russia may be looking for a diplomatic solution, but they were waiting for Russia to act and show their willingness. This might be the sign that these talks of finding a resolution should continue. That would be great. That is exactly what we want to see in these uncertain times, but the optimism should definitely be cautious. The situation is currently unfolding, and who knows what may happen. While the troops are leaving, they are leaving some military equipment behind, which could mean that they'll have an easier time regrouping should things unfortunately go that way. That is exactly the reason for the cautious optimism. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said that there were signs of a diplomatic opening, but that, quote, "the intelligence that we're seeing today is still not encouraging." He claims that from his point of view, the signals are mixed. He explained that Russian forces were building hospitals near Ukraine's borders and that more battalions were moving closer to the borders, which he says could, quote, "only be constructed as preparation for an invasion." I don't want that to be true, but the evidence is certainly compelling. We can't just listen to what people say. There's a reason for the old adage, actions speak louder than words. It seems trivial at a time like this, in a scenario like this, but perhaps it really is the most meaningful. This is at the same time that Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said that Kiev would only believe that Russia was moving towards de-escalation if they saw for themselves that Russian troops were being pulled back. If you're like me, you might be sitting there wondering why on earth Russia would have troops stationed at the border while also swearing that they're not going to invade. I mean, we're not talking about a small amount of troops either. We're talking about upwards of 100,000. That's a lot of people being moved just to say that nothing at all is going to happen. It's fishy at best, and Putin's answer for it? Well, he says that Russia can exercise troops on its own territory as it sees fit. I mean, That's definitely true, but there's perhaps better ways to do it. It's also important to note that not even 20 hours, not even a full day prior to this announcement of the removal of some troops, a US official told the media that some of the Russian troops taking part in the drills had started to move into quote attack positions close to the Ukrainian border. Just another red flag to go along with the surprising announcement. Here's the thing, in late December of last year, there were some similar claims that were coming from Moscow, similar claims of de-escalation, but what we saw on the ground did not align with what was being said. Another thing that is most certainly worth mentioning is that for weeks now, officials have been warning that just a regular old-fashioned invasion might not be the only attack on Ukraine that we should be worried about. They have explained that a ground attack could come from Russia or Belarus, but it might also come in the form of a cyber attack, or perhaps what is called a false flag attack, which is staged to look like an assault by Ukrainian forces against pro-Russian fighters, which would then potentially put Russia in a position where they might use that as a sort of precursor to launch an invasion. Basically, it means that we should be watching from all angles and really looking at it critically. We have many different technologies available to us now that changes things a lot when it comes to times and tensions like these. This is all to say that there is a small glimmer of hope and optimism that Russia is really pulling back troops, but when we look at the bigger picture and the evidence, or really lack thereof, things still aren't looking great. There's no proof to back these claims, and in fact there's proof of the exact opposite. I mean, after Russia claimed they were pulling back troops, they still went on, just today, to take part in military drills in the Gomel region of Belarus. These drills included an OTR-21 Tochka-U missile system launching projectiles into the sky. Kind of a bizarre thing to do after speaking of de-escalation. Right now, the best thing we can hope for is that the talks amongst the US and NATO go well. Putin has said that he's ready for talks after the news of the US and NATO rejecting his wishes for them to keep Ukraine, as well as other former Soviet republic, out of NATO. They rejected this idea and a few others, but they have expressed their desire to discuss a range of security measures that Russia has previously proposed. Putin has said that he is ready to discuss things like limiting the deployment of intermediate-range missiles in Europe, the transparency of drills, and other sorts of measures similar to this that would help build the confidence, but he also expressed that he needs the West to agree to his main demands. This of course means that while he's seemingly open to conversation, who knows what may happen if both parties continue to reject some of his previous demands. The situation is obviously unfolding before our very eyes, and things can change in an instant. It's tough to say for sure what might happen, but there are arguments on both sides to remain as cautious as possible, but also remain optimistic that perhaps we won't see a war after all. These next few days will certainly be critical to seeing how this all plays out. Alright guys, that has been our video for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. Stay curious out there, LBQ fam, and I'll see you next time. Bye!